everybody. It's August 4th, 2019, about 2:30 p.m. and today I'm at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania in Strasburg, PA. I'm going to be giving you all a tour around the facility here. So here behind me is Pennsylvania Railroad 7002, an E2 Class Atlantic type, one of the fastest locomotives on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Was built in the early 1900s, ran on the Pennsy until probably about the 1940s. And it was retired and eventually came to the Strasburg Railroad here and ran for several decades before being put in the museum here. Now over here, on the other side of me is Pennsylvania Railroad 440 number 1223, which also ran on the Strasburg Railroad for several years before being put in the museum with number 7002. So here's number 1223. You see here it was retired in 1950 and began his career on the Strasburg Railroad in 1960. And over here, you got number 1187. This is a 280 consolidation type. You can see here. I believe this one was displayed in the World's Fair in 1939 by the Pennsy. Here's a Pennsy scale weight test car in front of me here. This is used to test track scales on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Here we have an HB&T caboose right here. I don't know what HB&T stands for, but it must be a railroad local to Pennsylvania here. It's a small caboose, one of the bobber type cabooses with only 2 axles. You can see here it's only got 4 wheels, 2 on each side. And looks like the car is open, so we'll go look around inside. How you doing? Here's a Reading commuter car powered by overhead cannoneer. You can see the pantograph over there. This was probably used in commuter service in the Philadelphia area. So behind me here is the famous E6S class locomotive number 460, which famously beat Charles Lindbergh's plane between DC and New York. So as many of you will probably know, Charles Lindbergh was the first man to fly a plane all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and so he flew his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, across the Atlantic, and he, after he got back to America, there were two sets of film that were going to be taken from Washington to New York, and one went on a plane, one went on a train, and this locomotive was pulling the train with the film of Lindbergh's flight across the Atlantic behind it. And they had a mobile darkroom on the train. The train got up to speeds of 120 miles an hour in Delaware, and Maryland, I believe, also Perryville, Maryland to Newark, Delaware, that area. Up to speeds of 120 miles an hour, pulling this film behind it. And they had a mobile darkroom on board the train, and so they were actually able to develop the film while the train was speeding northwards. And so the film that was on board this train, not only did the train arrive ahead of the plane, but the film got to the theaters in New York City much earlier than the film on the plane, because they were unable to develop the film on the plane due to not having a darkroom on board the plane. So they had to take it to a darkroom and develop the film in New York City after the film arrived by plane. So this train beat a plane. Here's a number of older passenger cars, older heavyweight cars, including this Pullman Lotus Club. And we got a Lehigh Valley bobber caboose in the back there. As you can see, it's only got 2 axles as well. Now there is the Pennsylvania Railroad position light signal. Here's another shot of 460's builder's plate. And a shot of 460 here. Beat a plane, pretty amazing. I believe that was in 1928 or 29. Here's a plaque talking about it, the Lindbergh engine. Here we've got a snowplow car. And over here is Pennsylvania Railroad, I believe H6 class, Commuter consolidation number 2846. So here's the future roundhouse project that they're planning on constructing here to store some of their outdoor locomotives. Now here is the famous Solari board from Philadelphia's 30th Street Amtrak station. This board is a unique design. The letters actually flip over themselves when every time a train changes. So if one of these were to change, all the letters would flip through all the different ones till it got to the right letter, and it makes a loud sound. As it changes, each time a new train comes to the top of the board and it goes down. So this is pretty unique. And you can see there, Farewell Philadelphia, it's taken out of service, I believe, the first few months of 2019, replaced with a new digital board. Here we've got a number of freight cars, including the Lehigh Valley boxcar, Delaware and Hudson boxcar. Looks like a Fruit Growers Express reefer.
Right, faster than the modern ones.
And behind me here is the famous GG1 number 4935. This is part of the GG1 class of electric locomotives on the Pennsylvania Railroad, and these were originally built starting, I believe, in 1935 through probably 39 or 40. yeah, I think 1935, 39, and 40. So Pennsylvania Railroad electrified a number of its lines east of Harrisburg between 1935 and 1938. Between 1932 and 1938, they electrified a number of lines east of Harrisburg. And the GG1 electric locomotive was the design chosen to be the principal passenger and freight locomotive on the Pennsylvania Railroad's electrified lines until the E44 over here behind me was constructed in the early 1960s. E44 replaced the GG1 on freight, but the GG1 still reigned on passenger service. There were also P5 locomotives, P5 electric locomotives that pulled only freight, or primarily freight, after the GG1s were delivered. This is E44, number 4465. This is a Conrail GP30 built in the early 60s and later went on to Conrail. It's pretty unique design exteriorly and aesthetically with the raised arch, above the cab. This locomotive, Pennsylvania Railroad 7006, I believe is probably a GP9, part of the group of engines that killed steam on the Pennsylvania Railroad in the late 50s. Here's a railroader's hall. And over here we've got Pennsylvania Railroad 5901, which I believe is an E7. I believe the only E7 in existence. And this right here is a Shay type locomotive from the Letonia Railway. You can tell it's a Shay because it's got the cylinders vertical on the side, and it turns a bunch of gears, which in turn turn more gears, which turn the wheels. Rather than on a conventional steam locomotive, there would be cylinders right above the wheels in this general area right here. This was generally used for logging, this design. Now there's a Climax locomotive here, and it looks like a Heisler as well back there. So these two locomotives were also primarily used for logging purposes. This is another gear-driven locomotive. You can see some of the gears down there underneath the wheels. And yet another gear-driven locomotive, the Heisler. Also primarily used for logging. You can see here. It's gear driven, got the cylinders vertical sticking out of the side under the boiler. You can see some of the big gears right here. And now on the Shay, here's more of the gears that would turn the locomotive's wheels. Pretty cool. This is Pennsylvania Railroad 5741, I believe G5S type locomotive used in commuter service in Pittsburgh and on Long Island. Over here, this is number 20, an old 260 Mogul type locomotive. This looks like a 19th century locomotive, the Tahoe on the Virginia and Truckee. Pretty neat. You can see this is from the Virginia and Truckee Railroad here. Here's a Cumberland Valley Railroad coach, or a combine car. This locomotive here in front of me, Reading 1251, was used by the Reading locomotive shops on the Reading Company Railroad to switch dead locomotives around the shop. Even I believe even after dieselization it was used. It switched Reading T1 locomotives that were used on the Reading Rambler excursions during even into the 1960s. So this locomotive behind me is what's known as a fireless cooker. It was used, so it's not a typical steam locomotive. Actually got its steam from a valve that from an industrial plant, and they would fill it with steam, and it would run around on the steam till it needed to be refilled. And it didn't have its own fire in it, so that was pretty handy in big industrial big industrial plants where there were lots of flammable things around. Now this one was for Pennsylvania Power and Light, so I don't believe there were any flammable things around, but it was still handy to have it just be able to connect to industrial steam lines and just power it up that way instead of having a fire in the boiler, in the firebox. And this is the largest fireless cooker ever built. You can see it's pretty huge. It's streamlined, pretty unique. Let's have a look. Here's the front end of the locomotive, this fireless cooker. This locomotive, number 1111, is another fireless cooker built by Heisler this time. Pretty unique as well. Well, not super unique, but pretty unusual as well. This one was used by Bethlehem Steel. This locomotive is the John Bull, which I believe was built in England for a predecessor to the Pennsylvania Railroad. You can see, John Bull is a nickname for English people. You can see it's got UK and American flags on there. This was one of the first locomotives ever used in the United States, and I believe this is a replica. I'm almost certain. Yeah, this is a replica of the original John Bull. Yeah, let's see. Yes, this is a replica here. Built in England as parts, and then assembled here in the United States of America. Pretty unique. Behind it is a 19th century railroad coach. Here's an early 20th century Pennsylvania Railroad combined car. And we're going to go look at, well, here is the insides of a GP30. Got a big, I believe, 12-cylinder, might be 16-cylinder power plant in there. But over here, what I was originally going to look at is number 94, an 040 locomotive. And these are pretty rare, little tiny switcher locomotives, even though in the confines of this building it looks pretty big. You can see here, unfortunately they removed some of the side rods, but you can see here it's only got 2 wheels on this side of the locomotive. It's only got 2 axles, an 040 type. And it's got a signature Pennsylvania Railroad Belpaire firebox, which increases the space, the heating space in the locomotive's firebox. There's a Railway Express Agency baggage car, express car behind the 4935 here. You can see this is what they would load baggage in, and express mail type stuff back when they still ran that on passenger trains. Let's take a look at the underneath of Pennsylvania Railroad 1187. So in many locomotive shops they would have facilities such as this where you could go underneath the steam locomotive and take a look at problematic things. So here's the underside of Pennsylvania Railroad 280 consolidation type number 1187. can see the underside of the boiler there. Pretty neat, pretty hard to see that on a regular locomotive. Here's the pilot. Underside of the cab, I believe, and firebox here. I think this is the ash pan right here. This thing. Yep, ash pan. And here's the underside of the tender of the locomotive. Some pins. Here's a couple. Pretty cool. Looks to be, this freight car here looks to be very, very old. Probably from the turn of the century. Not in the greatest condition, unfortunately. But it's still pretty neat. Here's the Delaware and Hudson boxcar. Let's go take a look at this refrigerator car over here. Here's our model display. Refrigerated. So there you can see there's a display of people putting ice inside the top of the car, owned by Fructose Express, and you can see things representing crates of fruit and stuff inside the car. See, this is what they would put inside the car. This is. These are ice blocks they would put in here, representatives of ice blocks. And let's look inside this Delaware and Hudson boxcar. So in this type of boxcar, they would carry all kinds of goods. This is a wooden boxcar, probably from the early 1920s era. And hobos would often ride in these during the Great Depression and before and after. So now let's go outside and see the locomotives on display out there. So this is the yard. Right here is a Pittsburgh and Lake Erie caboose. You can see PNLE on a truck there. Pretty neat. Hope they get that fixed up. Here looks like some stuff they're working on. It's a Conrail Auto Parts boxcar back there. And here's the Pennsylvania Railroad observation car. Stub end one, flat on the rear instead of rounded like many are. This was probably off the Broadway Limited or one of the other famous Pennsylvania Railroad passenger trains. Here's the Pennsylvania Railroad 060 undergoing restoration, it looks like. You can see the cab's kind of torn apart, which gives you a good view of the firebox, the whole shape of it. Pretty neat. Over there we've got Pennsylvania Railroad L1S Class 520, 282 Mikado type. This locomotive has the same design boiler as the famous K4S class, of which number 1361 and number 3750, which is over here in the yard, that's his tender there, are of that class, the famous 462 type. Here's another view of this locomotive. Here's former Amtrak E60 number 603. This was used on a Northeast Corridor passenger rail service. Now here's my personal favorite locomotive, the M1B type 6755. This locomotive is in horrible shape. It's a real shame. They've ripped off a lot of the piping, the boiler jacket, the main rod is gone, the walkway is gone, But you know, yeah, some of the domes even are missing, but at least it got saved. This locomotive was a big asset to the Pennsylvania Railroad. Really important in freight hauling service, especially east of Altoona. Between Altoona and Harrisburg, it was the mainstay of freight service along that line. Now, in equally bad shape, almost, is K4S number 3750. This is a sister to K4S number 1361, which is a little bit more famous. You can see it's missing its main rod there. Really a shame. Hope they get these engines fixed up someday, and maybe even restored to service. But it's unlikely. Now, over there, we've got Pennsylvania Railroad GG1 4800, also known as Old Rivets. This engine was the first GG1 ever built, and you can see it's in much more riveted shape than its sister 4935 over there in the museum. There's Toaster 915 AEM7 type locomotive, just retired in 2016. One of the mainstays of Amtrak Northeast Corridor service for about 25 years, and was replaced with the ACS 64 type. And behind the GG1 there is, I think this is a BB1 type electric locomotive used with the under the Manhattan tunnels. And over here we got a Lehigh Valley Bud rail diesel car. Here we got a Monongahela Railway caboose. You can see the Monongahela Herald there. And behind it we got the industrial brown hoist crane, big hook. Pretty cool. Industrial brown hoist. Pretty neat. And over there's a rail bus. That might be off of Maryland and Pennsylvania, but I don't know. Now this turntable here they're eventually going to build a roundhouse around it to display some of the steam locomotives that are rusting away out here, keep them out of the weather. Here's a better shot of that Monongahela caboose. Here is a Maryland and Pennsylvania, I don't know what kind of switcher that is. Might be an NW2, might be an SW8, I don't know. But it's a switcher. And that is a Bud Metroliner owned by the Penn Central. That was one of the fastest trains in America once. And now that's all that's left of it, just rusting away. And here's a better shot of the cool little rail bus. Let me step back. Here it is. Pretty cool. This here is number 6788, an H10 class locomotive. H10S. 280 consolidation type. Here's Alexander Cassett, one of the presidents of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Alright everybody, thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe for more content just like this. Again, thanks for watching and God bless you.